There have been a lot of star players picked first in the last 10 years, and this is expected because they're going number one for a reason. But who do you think is the most forgettable out of them all? I think Eric Fisher is a good candidate, but just because he was an offensive lineman, it feels like a sellout question. Obviously, there's been a couple busts since then, too. Looks like Jameis Winston or potentially Trevon Walker, except he broke out nicely this year of 10 sacks, and he's still young. I would mainly just consider him forgettable just because Hutchinson went right after him. I think that the real most forgettable guy in the past 10 years was Jadeveon Clowney. I think people forget he was taken number one, and when he was taken one, he wasn't even taken to be the best on that defensive line. He was more so to complement J.J. Watt. This isn't saying that Clowney has had a bad career. It's actually been pretty good, but no one really remembers him for being an elite edge rusher for the Texans. He's remembered more for being more of a complimentary guy with them, and now he's kind of become a little journeyman-ish in the league. He started his career with the Texans and only played 4 games in his rookie year, had 7 tackles, and the concern was there for sure. And it was just because of injury he played little games, but still. In 2015, though, it would look up for the Texans and Clowney. Clowney would finish with 4.5 sacks and 40 tackles. He also did force a fumble. The Texans, although with the same record as 2014, did make the playoffs, losing in the wild card. In 2016, Clowney still hadn't arrived, although improvement was seen. He had 6 sacks and 52 tackles. The Texans finished the season losing in the divisional round. And in 2017, Clowney would have probably his best season of his career. Although the Texans took a step back going 4-12 due to a little bit of struggling play from a rookie Watson and J.J. Watt injuries, Clowney would finish 9.5 sacks, 59 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 recoveries. Clowney had finally arrived to the NFL 4 years later, but for a first overall pick, you'd expect more out of him by now, or even in years prior. In 2018, Clowney wouldn't see any improvement. He had less tackles, sacks practically the same, forced 1 less fumbled, but recovered 3 compared to 2 last year. This would be Clowney's last year with Houston. The Texans lost in the wild card to the Colts. Texans would franchise tag Clowney and send him over to the Seahawks in exchange for a couple players and a third-round pick. For the Seahawks, he would have 3 sacks and 31 tackles, forced 4 fumbles as well. It was a down year for him, and the Seahawks did lose in the divisional that year. In 2020, Clowney went to the Titans where he would play 8 games and finish with 19 tackles. He ended the season on injured reserve and wouldn't come back the following year. And in 2021, he would sign with the Browns. After the Browns had a nice playoff run in 2020, he would have 9 sacks that season, but the Browns failed to make the playoffs, and they would next year too, where Clowney would have 2 sacks in 22. Clowney made comments at the Browns, and he would not come back for 2023. In 23, he signed with the Ravens, where he would have a huge resurgence. He would match his previous high with 9.5 sacks, and then he also had 2 forced fumbles. He had 43 tackles as well. The Ravens did lose in the AFC Championship this past year to the Chiefs. Clowney is now signed with the Panthers for the 24 season. This will be his 6th team and 5th team in the past 6 seasons. Clowney wasn't a bust, but just not the first pick player people would want him to be. He was never brought in to be the number one guy. Either he was complimentary to J.J. Watt in Houston, and he wasn't the cornerstone of that defense in Seattle. Tennessee might have been his best shot, but they also had Jeffrey Simmons. Cleveland, he was there to complement Myles Garrett, and Baltimore already had a stellar defense. I like Clowney, but I would just say he's forgettable for being a number one pick, and you always kind of feel like he was a second round guy more so.